All right. So here we are in my FlowBoost test program. As I was noting, when you set up My Tokens in Marketo, you can use them in any smart campaign that triggers directly from inside that program. You guys all know that, but it's also really important when you want to have different things passed to webhooks, whether they be FlowBoost webhooks or anything, using program level My Tokens as well as the built-in program.id is really important. The built-in program.id, as we showed last time, can be used to have a different webinar count for every program. And that's the way you would usually do it, right? You have an event event type program for every webinar. And so you want to say for, here we have, webinar 8723, program ID 9999, program ID 123, they all have their own count. That's what we're gonna do. So I'm going to walk through, again, this was where I left off last time. I really feel like we're probably going to run into a time problem based on this technical issue. I don't really know what to do about that, but I'll just continue apace and we'll see what happens. So this was, I actually renumbered this as FlowBoost campaign 100. It actually was more of like the 000 from the last session. But this is our simple form fill triggered, and also campaign is requested triggered. I use campaign is requested when I'm demoing because it's a lot easier than filling out the form. But today, if we do still stick with the time that we have, and I'm getting a chat, if you just guys hold on for just a moment. Yeah, that's a suggestion, but that's not it. It's already turned off. So where are we? Yeah, so this smart campaign is triggered either by campaign is requested, which is helpful for demos, as well as for chaining campaigns together, as you all know, and by fills out form. So today we're actually going to take the moment to fill out the form that then triggers the incrementing of the webinar counter and then allows the form to change. So we're going to fill out this, this form, which is a local form right in this program. It doesn't have to be, it could be a global form. I'm sure you all know that. And the flow is something very simple. I'm adding the person to my demo list because I just want to see them in a list, but that's not really important to the idea of counting. The important thing is that we call this webhook called FlowBoost Increment Webinar Counter. I've showed you last time that FlowBoost Increment Webinar Counter is a very simple two-liner, just sets up a counter name. That's that begins with the prefix webinars, program ID, and then has the program ID, in this case, 8723 at the end of it. So it's going to be webinars, program ID, 8723. That's the name of our counter. So you can think of FlowBoost counter feature as to some degree like a name server. It's like a number server. Look at that. It's like everything has every counter has a name and it has a number affixed to it. Getting some other chat questions here, just give me a moment. So we do have a question. Great. I have a landing page with a form that lists several dates. After the date passes, can I use FlowBoost to update the field values? Let's kind of explore what you mean by that. Asker of question, DC, let's say. Do you want to, Rusty, can we put DC on audio? I want to hear more about after the date passes and what the trigger would be there. Because Marketo doesn't trigger on a date going by. That's kind of why I'm sort of wondering what the exact use case is here. So Marketo can't say it just became 5 days ago, right? But you can have a batch campaign that looks for everybody whose date has become, 5 days out or 10 days out or 10 days in the future or 5 days in the future, but it does have to be done. You have to run something to get there. The asker probably already knows that, but I'm sort of wondering what we're trying to have happen. A landing page with a form that lists several dates. I'm imagining we mean like webinar dates, and some are in the past and some are in the future. Is that right? Or
working on getting.
Am I hearing it correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's a weekly webinar and the dates appear on the form. That wouldn't really be something that you need FlowBoost for, though. That's what I'm sort of perplexed there, because you can just use JavaScript, right? Sure. So I would do that in JavaScript. I mean, FlowBoost isn't really, I mean, FlowBoost could be used, for example, to reach out, call back into the Marketo API and update a my token. That absolutely can be done, and that can be a really cool way to use FlowBoost to sort of create self-updating or dynamically updating my tokens. But doesn't really seem like the best fit here. I would just do that in JS on the client side, if I'm understanding what your question. Do you want to remove dates that are in the past? And it's on the LP. So, I mean, FlowBoost runs on the back end to permanently update, you know, lead level fields, right? Or as I said, it could update a program level my token if you wanted it to, and then if you'd use that my token on your form to draw your radio buttons for the different webinar dates, then it would function that way. But I feel like that's really doing a loop around, and I'm always very clear about, you know, what FlowBoost is good for. So schedule a campaign, right? So the question becomes updated thinking: to schedule a campaign to call a webhook to update the field. Is the field a my token? That's what I'm wondering. A form field. Yeah, I mean, you could use the Forms Asset API to update the form descriptor. I got to tell you, as a person who does a ton of form work, that is not the way I would do it, though. I am always very frank about what's good for what, and that is something I would do in JS, absolutely. In fact, I have been doing it quite a bit recently. Someone has lists of selects and they want to trim things down or have, let's call it, context-sensitive select options that depend on the day or other fields on the form. Some of that you can do with visibility rules, some of which takes a little more. So if you want to say like date-sensitive options in a select dropdown, 100% of the time I would do that in JavaScript, not using FlowBoost. Although you're right that you could loop back and do FlowBoost to update the form descriptor. It's a pretty fragile setup, whereas the client side is, I mean, it's not so much fragile, it's just multiple hops and things being updated and, you know, crunching the asset database, stuff like that. So yeah, I would do that in JS. When I say JS, I mean, FlowBoost is JavaScript as well. But I mean, of course, for anyone who's confused, client-side browser JS. That's where I'd do that. Someone else had a question earlier who wants to set up a separate call. We can do that. But also said, interested in being able to monitor and manage webinar registrants and automate the closing of registration. Yes, it's exactly that's what the demo that I don't really, that I didn't want to abbreviate it. The full demo is actually, you know, 3 or 4 different features, but that's fundamental to FlowBoost's feature set is counting registrants, closing off registration, sending people to a waitlisted page, or, you know, a form where they can sign up to be on the waitlist. That's what I was going to demo, is you can actually just use the same form, but even change the fields on the form and have like a rich text area that dynamically displays it. It says this event is full. Please sign up to join the waitlist. So you can actually change sort of the context in which the form operates based on the number of people who have already registered for your event. All that is sort of core functionality. All right, and JK says it's very excited. Cool. So we can set that up, and I'll you know, walk you through that. In fact, if multiple people have questions in that same regard, it's kind of weird. We could end up circling back to the same webinar, but I just didn't really want to rush that. Any other questions coming in?
Any other questions? Well, we've got time. We've got plenty of time.
Well, I'm hesitantly going to log in again, because maybe, since JK is interested, I don't know if JK is still on the call and wants to drop, we can do this privately as well. But since I do see quite a few people still waiting, maybe I'll gingerly tiptoe back into this part of the registration process. Okay, well, all right. So people are on. Let's tiptoe back in. I'm disappointed and apologize. We won't get to the advanced stuff, but I think that at this point I can still do this more basic initial thing. So this is where I was left off before. This is where I left off before I was made aware that people were still seeing my screen flashing wildly. I hadn't realized. So, and I'm going to be periodically checking the Q&A because we are officially in Q&A period, so we'll see what happens. As I was noting, perhaps now more calmly, the smart list here captures filling out the form that I'm using for the demo, and the flow, aside from adding the person to the list, which is more of a housekeeping thing for this demo webinar itself, I'm calling this webhook. And what does that webhook look like? Knowing that you guys couldn't really see this before because of the flicker. It's so weird. No flicker here. All right. I'm going to look in admin and webhooks. We already have that in here. Perhaps unnecessary reminder, but just to mention that when you make a change in webhooks, again, you do want to clone the webhook each time you make a change. Marketo doesn't document this, but webhook definitions are cached, meaning in this case, the webhook, the payload template, which is your code to call the counter, and increment it. If you made some little change in here, like you wanted to change the name of the counter that you're using, you would have to clone it and then change it in the Smart Campaign accordingly. So just think of each one. As soon as the caching happens when you call a webhook for the first time. This is for all webhooks, nothing to do with FlowBoost, but just something to be aware of. But this one's already set up, as I mentioned, to use this counter name. Every counter has a name, and this is just going to be /webinars/program ID. And since we're running it from program 8723, it's going to be then /8723. Now let's take a look at this page that I set up. Let's take a look at the form and the page as well. This is what I really want to walk through, like how I think of this whole setup in its entirety. You can do all or part of this. The incrementing of the webinar counter is a simple thing, as you can see, and that's going to happen no matter what. The question is, what do you do with that counter? So the counter is going up, 1 registrant, 2 registrants, 3 registrants, or 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things. It counts anything you want. What do you do with that? And that's where the question comes in, using your other access, which is your public API key, which you all have if you signed up for a community key. Everyone has a private key and a public key. So the private key is used to call the webhook, and the public key is the only thing you should ever or could ever expose on a page to the public. So the public key allows you to read the current count. That's it. The public key will tell you, for this identified counter name, webinars program ID 9999, webinars program ID 1234, what the count of that is, the current number. That's sort of, and that's it. You can't write to it. You can't change anything else. You can't read anything else. But that public API key is critical because it helps, because that lets FlowBoost navigate and show the same counter stuff. We obviously need to have them be coordinated. So let's look at this form. Now, as many of you know, I fancy myself at least kind of a Marketo form expert, so even on the form here, I don't want to go, too far into super cool stuff, but so this is set up with some visibility rules, and so we've got a hidden field called sign up mode, which is used to switch between these 2 visibility rule govern rich text areas. So this one shows, I'm pointing at my screen like a person doesn't know how to use Zoom, but anyway, this one, this visibility rule shows the rich text area if the mode is not waitlisted. And as you guys can well imagine, this one is shown if the sign up mode is waitlisted. So you're probably already thinking, how do we decide which mode the person's in? And that we'll see in a second, that's on the page. But this is how the form is set up. It's actually a very, very simple form. There's nothing, I mean, maybe this is a little beyond what some of you have done, but other than that, it's very basic. Oh, and the questions for the speaker, this is just to kind of show off how this works. The questions for the speaker is shown only if the sign up mode is not waitlisted. So what that means is we've created a single form that operates in both modes. if it's waitlisted mode, we still show the form, but we don't show the questions for the speaker. And if it's in regular mode, we show sign up for our upcoming webinar, and then they put in their first name, last name, email address, and they will see the speaker notes. So it's like just kind of a cue for us really in the demo to see the form, how the form can take different forms, can take different shapes, right? So yeah, so this is built-in Marketo functionality, and these are based on this URL parameter mode equals allowed. I hope that made a certain amount of sense, but and by the way, just to kind of sort of restate this, I know I probably said it 4 times already, you can use FlowBoost counters to do anything you want. And you don't even have to do what I'm doing here on the form. You could use the counter. You can check the counter and just redirect them to a event full page. You could do it much more basically than I'm doing here. But this is kind of an advanced, extended way of showing what you can do once you know how many people have signed up for an event, or how many, again, I like to be sort of abstract about it, how many things have been counted of a certain sort. That could be anything. You can take any action you want, but in this case, I'm sort of trying to plug it in more deeply into the Marketo forms architecture, which I happen to know a lot about, or you know how to put stuff together in the UI at least. So here's a page, simple landing page that has this is a guided landing page that has that form on it. There's a little placeholder here to show in show the current registrant count. That's just for us today on the webinar, so you can see what the current registrant count is. And it's got this in it. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be, you know, instantly recognizable to those of you out there who haven't looked at stuff like this before, but it's actually it's pretty basic stuff, because right here, I'm checking the current count against the max registrants program level token. That's a program level token. We just want to take a quick look here. I like to manage as many things as possible using tokens, and because we're using a Marketo landing page, we can output a Marketo token directly into the page, right? We couldn't do that if we were on a third-party form. That's why you can do it any way you want. But when you have the advantage of a Marketo landing page, why not use it, right? So over here in the My Tokens for this program, I have set up my max registrants as 4. So that's going to say that when I go over 4 registrants, we're going to shift into our next mode, the waitlisted mode. This is not FlowBoost code, by the way. This is just some JS that I threw onto the page to kind of work with the FlowBoost code. The only thing you need to do on the landing page side, the only important part is this part right here, which is using your public API key, which is right here. This person's public API key is pub1a9x, etc. And having that little script, it's called JSONP. Some of you, I hope, are familiar with the idea of JSONP. JSONP is a way to pull data in cross-domain that's, you know, basic, not super secure data. In this case, it's just a counter. Again, you just have to know the name, and you're pulling in the counter count. So we just include this. This is all you need on your page, and then you can do whatever you want with the counter. I happen to have done some sort of elegant stuff with it, changing around the URL and blah, 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 but you can do anything you want with it once you get it in there. So this page is already approved, and so let's take a look at it. This is something I have to remember when I'm on a webinar, is to always open an incognito mode window, because Marketo caches landing pages. So I just want to make sure I don't mess that up. I'm saying that out loud for myself. So here's an incognito window, and here's our form in its basic state. Okay. I have some pre-fill going on to make things easier. You see that questions for the speaker is displayed. You recall in the form editor, I'm displaying that by default. And it also says sign up for our upcoming webinar. And here's a test email address. And the current registrant count, this is more just for us today, so we can see what it's doing under the hood. You could put that in there, and you could say, it's filling up soon, current registrant count is 13. So you could expose that to the end user if you wanted to. But for us today, it's really just so we can see how FlowBoost is counting on the back end. So let's say we're going to do test registrant 005. So we're going to start with a little pattern of these people, right? So that's going to be 005. that person just signed up. Here's our next person. Let's see what happens now. So in the back end, you're now, for that person, it's running through the webhook and incrementing the counter. And now the current registrant count is 1. So we're already counting that stuff on the back end, as you can imagine. Let's put another one in. And then we're going to look in Marketo and see how that works. All right. And the current registrant count is 2. So you can see the registrant count is being incremented, and you're pulling that into the page. This is something that, for experienced Marketo users out there, you know there's no other way to do this. And again, to remind us all that, I'm going to take and answer a question here. As far as the count, set limited to the full form, it can be applied to multiple times. You can have, the question is, if you're signing up from training gates, can you count based on a single group of dates? You can have as many counters as you want. You have an unlimited number of different counters, and an unlimited number of counters can be read into the page at the same time. This example, it's a good question because it shows that an even more advanced application. This one is relatively simple because I'm saying that for every program there's a single counter, but you could have a program that's managing multiple events, and then you could have event ID 1's counter, event ID 2's counter, event ID 3's counter. It's infinitely scalable. There's no limit on the number of counters you can have. I hope that answers that question. So we can see how as we fill in more people, the counter goes up exactly as we expect. Let's take a look at some of these people. The reason that I have it adding to a static list is actually so I can find them easily. We all know sometimes, you know, if you just let people flow into Marketo, you may not know where they went. So not a good thing for a webinar, especially when it's crunched for time, as we might have been. So I have them added to this FlowBoost demo leads list, so we can check them out. They should be at the bottom because they were recently created. And just to kind of round up and give you guys, you know, sort of square the circle, if you will, so you can see what all these people did as they signed up for the form. And of course, you know, add them to the program, change their program status, all the other stuff we always do. It absolutely complements your usual form progression. The key is, the new thing is counting the number of people who have passed through this campaign, counting the number of people who have added to the program, and being able to take action on that. You could take action on it within Marketo as well. Here, when I say within Marketo, meaning on the back end if you wanted to. But here we're using it to update the form, as we saw. All right, so there were 3. I guess I could show you the demo of what happens when we go over 4. But first, I just wanted you guys to check this out. So we just look at the activity log for this new person. Should be easy to comprehend. They're brand new, so it shouldn't be too confusing. The new person is created via filled out form. Their inferred country, that's a separate smart campaign, right? And then we call the webhook. Very simple webhook. And Marketo was very helpful here. It shows us exactly what it passed, what the exact payload that it passed to FlowBoost. So we get to see, instead of having curly brace program.id, we see that the program ID was 8723. So we know that this was logged. This was exactly what FlowBoost saw. That's exactly what we expect. And then the response says the counter name is webinars program. That's just a little reflection back that that FlowBoost does. It's really just a comment saying, yes, I updated that webinar. So that's being ticked up one at a time. And if we do it, let's see, so the maximum number is 3. Let's flip it around, just save us one thing. So I think I had the maximum number was 4, right? I'm going to turn it down, the max registrants for this particular one. And again, to kind of answer JK's question there, you could have multiple limits for multiple things. JK also asks, it could say that if somebody submits one of 4 values, unique for the same date, but showing a different value based on times, and we could tie those 4 values to the one counter. Sure, you can do anything you want. It's all about, ultimately what it comes down to is a counter just has a name. I happen to use those slashes because I like the way it looks. It looks like a file name, you know, webinars, events, like it's on your file system. You can use underscores if you want, but I like to use that /. And so as long as that counter has a unique name, you're counting up in that. You can count down too, but in this case, we're counting up in that counter, and then do whatever we want on it. And it could all be tied to a single counter, absolutely. So now I've set the max registrants to 3. Now, let's see what happens. Well, look at that. Because we went over our max registrations of 3, now I see, sorry, this webinar is full. I have the option to join the waitlist. It's using that same form, but it's hiding what was down here, which was the questions for the speaker. In this artificial case, you're not allowed to ask questions of the speaker while you're still on the waitlist. So it's a simple flip back and forth. Again, if I'm like, okay, we have more people available, we're going to have another moderator to take some of the load off, whatever, and I say instead the max registrants will now be 5. Immediately when people visit this page, whoop, that didn't work. What do you think about that? Let's try that again. Sorry. I think Marketo is caching this, is why. Yep. Marketo does a quick blip of caching that because I'm working on my same machine. But now that we've turned it back up to 5, we've allowed 2 more registrants to come through. So now it shows us the full form with the questions for the speaker and, of course, the usual subtle heading as opposed to that orange warning. So all kinds of logic like this can be built. As I said, even easier than this, and one of my original demos, even easier than this is just checking if the current count is greater than my max registrants token, then document location equals thank you for trying, but try again later, just a waitlist webinar full page. So very easy to do. The simplest side to the more complex side here to even more complex as the person is asking in the Q&A. Could I have multiple counters going for different webinars? So you could fill one webinar and then remove that from the select dropdown and leave other ones up, or remove radio buttons, hide them, gray them out. You can do whatever you want. The key is what the count is on the client. Every one of your leads is going to see the page, and you'll be able to take advantage of how many people have, you'll be able to know how many people have signed up when they're looking at the page, and you can take whatever brilliant, awesome action you want as a result of that. Now, on the back end in Marketo, another cool thing you could do is you can have an alert send to somebody whenever a new email comes in, whenever a new person signs up. The salesperson, let's say, or if marketing ops is keeping track of these things, you could new registrant, and it could say new registrant, the 19th registrant has registered, or new sign up parenthesis number 21. So you get that immediately. You don't have to go back and look at your list and depending on where else you're keeping track of such things. You don't have to look separately of a count. You can attach the count to your alerts as well. You could even, although this is rarely necessary, I would assume, you could even tell the person when you send them their autoresponder, thanks for signing up. You're the 99th person, but maybe that's a bit cheesy. But certainly notifying the alert recipient not only of a new sign up, but of what number they are, I think is another valuable way that you can use this functionality. So again, and now we're down to the usual time, and a few more minutes left here. There are truly infinite ways that I could imagine using this counter feature, and that's why I built it to be as generic as possible to just count stuff. And if any of you want to sign up with me to do some hands-on sessions, I can show you how to do some of the other stuff I was going to do, such as adding people to a round robin number of buckets. Something you cannot do in Marketo alone, as you may have noticed, is you can use random sample by percentage to try to sort people somewhat evenly into buckets, but you have to know how many leads you have that you're sorting in the first place, and that to me is just a complete no-go. With FlowBoost, on the other hand, you could declare that you have, as in this example, 4 buckets, and you can round robin people exactly evenly with no mistakes. You can pass people through FlowBoost and say this person goes in bucket 1, 2, 3, 4, bucket 1, 2, 3, 4, and keep doing that for everyone who passes through. You don't have to know in advance roughly how many people there were and sort of guess about that percent thing. It's actually going to distribute them evenly across the buckets. And that, of course, itself, that bucket concept could also be used for round robining anything. So that's round robin buckets. But think about what else you might want to round robin. Round robin assign people to particular groups or particular, A/B test groups, for example. That's usually randomly assigned, but you could do it this way. Of course, round robin assigning lead owners and salespeople as they come in, something that Marketo itself can't do. We can assign to a queue in Salesforce and apply similar logic, but you can do this all within Marketo itself. And again, it's that little thing. You look at Marketo and all the super, advanced stuff you can do in a flow, and random sample is a really cool feature to have built into the platform, but it's not the same as this. And I usually want this, not random sample, when I'm trying to slice my database up or sub-slice an existing part of my database. So that's what I can show you if you want more hands-on demos. I was going to show you how to do that. And then, of course, abstracting. I have 2 more minutes here, and no one has asked any questions. So
I got one question for you, Sanford, that came back from DC, and I hadn't thought about it until now either. Can you use the counter to decrement?
Of course, yes. Yep. You can have you can have a webhook that just removes 1 from the counter whenever you call it. Absolutely. And you'd want to do that because if somebody unregisters, whatever, for full support, yeah.
Awesome.
What was I going to say? I think the last thing I was just going to mention here is this, again, this bucketing and cycling through concept can be used for distributing discount codes. And that was my other demo I was going to do had we had the time. I was going to show how you could use a CSV full of discount codes, just a list of discount codes all in one column. And you can use a counter to keep track of the last one you gave out. So this is, again, what's really great about when you finally sort of come to grips with counter concept in the abstract as you start, when you're just walking around making your coffee, taking a shower, whatever, you start thinking like, wait, just counters in general. And that's how you distribute discount codes or any other thing that needs to be distributed one at a time from top to bottom. You say, I'm going to give out number 1 and I'm going to increment it by 1. Okay. Someone else requests 1. What was my last index? Oh, that was 2. Okay. I'm going to give them discount code number 2, random alphanumeric code number 2, and then I'm going to increment it by 2. So that's what you're doing. You're keeping an index going down the CSV. The CSV doesn't need to get updated. It's just a static file that you can store in Marketo Design Studio, right? But every time you check it, you also use the counter, and so you give the person the nth entry in the list. And there, as you can imagine, are a lot of applications of that even outside of discount codes. Just kind of running down a list, pulling stuff off a stack, if you will, popping stuff off a stack. It's really shifting stuff off a stack, I guess, in technical terms. But anyway, the same idea of keeping that index. So we are now officially out of time. I hope that extreme technical difficulty wasn't too alienating for any of you.
These are the joys of live webinars in the world of Zoom sometimes.
Yeah, I guess so. It only seems to have happened that one time we did a rehearsal, right, and then today.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's about.
The good news is that we're going to be making, in our follow-up here, we're going to have a recording of today's so we can edit that when we get done in the meet and make that available for everybody, and also include that FlowBoost, the first webinar that we did, FlowBoost 1. So people will have access. We had a couple questions. Will we make both those available? Yes, we'll make both of those available and the follow-up email as well. And as Sanford has said, he's always very available as well for your technical FlowBoosty questions. If you've got something specific, I'm sure that Sanford's okay with you reaching out and getting.
Yeah, please do. And if you don't have your community key, well, you might as well get one.
Go get one. It's free.
Right. Yeah.
It's free. Yeah, free giveaway.
Yeah.
And we'll include a link to that as well, the FlowBoost page where you can.
Right. By the way, everything we looked at today, including the things that I hinted at here, this is all Community Edition compatible. It's just a matter of whether 100,000 calls per month is enough for you to do that. The next step that I was going to demo that I didn't get a chance to, that would be a FlowBoost standard feature. We're using the Google Sheets VQL language. But all the stuff we looked at today and that I highlighted today is all community compatible. So, come on in.
Fantastic. Go get your FlowBoost magic on. And thanks again to Sanford for taking time today to walk us through this stuff. Look for the follow-up email, which will have contact information, links to those both of our FlowBoost webinars here. And also, if you haven't had a chance, go check out Mops Pros. It's a great Slack channel where you can ask your questions, FlowBoost and non-FlowBoost related, anything Marketo, anything Mops. So go check out Mops Pros. Sanford's on there as well, along with a lot of other great Marketo practitioners. So
that's a great point. Definitely ask your FlowBoost questions on there. I'm always watching. So.
All right. Well, that being said, thanks everybody for attending. Stay tuned. We will have another webinar coming up in January for sure. So we're pulling topics together for that. If you have a topic idea in mind, you can always send that to us, send it our way, reply to the email for the follow-up, and we'll put that on the list for topics. So watch for that coming out shortly. Outside of that, I hope everyone has a great afternoon and stay tuned for more content coming shortly. Take care all.